thank you for coming. I hope what we are able to offer today is of use to you. I'll do a quick introduction. I'm Marnie Norris. I'm the Senior Vice President of Programming for Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration. And, you know, I know most of you know who we are, in case you don't. We're an international organization that works to dissolve bias towards children with disabilities by helping communities both design and develop inclusive playgrounds and then program them for social inclusion, both in the community and then in the schools, so that the playgrounds become classrooms where children with and without disabilities learn to find connection and play beyond their misconceptions in a meaningful way. So that's our goal. That's who we are. Jennifer, you're with Inclusion Matters as well. Take it away.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Quick, and I am the Education Program Manager for Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration. So welcome to everybody. I and a colleague of mine are really just sort of boots on the ground with the kids, prepping kids for their interaction on our inclusive playgrounds. So we go in and speak to children about their perceptions and misconceptions, and then we partner and play on the playground. And then we come back in and we debrief and we talk about what they've learned and help them to synthesize their experience. So welcome, everybody.
That's great.
So I'm going to introduce Josan in a moment. I first wanted to just take a moment and say, obviously we're not on our playgrounds. We've never missed them more in our entire lives. But what we're trying to do is keep connection going for parents, for children, for teachers, to make sure that our community stays connected. And I know, you know, we've talked to a lot of parents about what they're struggling with right now. And how do you be mom or dad, be a breadwinner, and be teacher, therapist, and all of that? It can be a lot some days. So what we're looking for is information. So that's why we started our Lunch and Learns, to just share any information we can that's going to be of support in a really sometimes challenging time. So we brought Josan Wright on, who has been a longtime professional advisory board member for Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration, and is a wealth of knowledge. We had the pleasure of first meeting Josan when we started working with Los Angeles Unified Special Ed Division. And so I'm gonna let Josan take her own introduction away and share a little bit about who she is, and then we'll get rolling.
Hey, hi, I'm Josan Wright, and I'm the author of a book called The Happy Little Garbage Truck. And when I was working with Marty and Jennifer, you know, I could see that play was such an essential part of a child's life. We were outside of the classroom and they were having such a great time on the playground, the children that I was servicing. It was just like a natural friendship. We all love play, and we started communicating even after I left that position. And then I wrote this book, and it has a huge part of its component as play, but mostly self-esteem. And so that's why I'm happy to be here, because I'm doing some YouTubes in the morning about how parents, while we're on this quarantine, can actually work toward helping their children gain more self-esteem, better understanding of themselves, and do it in a fun way with a little bit of research behind it, so you can understand better why these particular points were picked by myself, or what do they call it? I did a little bit of fine tuning of certain ones, but I tried to select the ones that were most important and effective. And so hopefully we'll hit some of those points today in our conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Everybody is on mute because we have a lot of folks joining us today. But in your chat box, you're going to see instructions on how to raise your hand to ask questions. So our goal is to really get through, you know, the first chunk of Josan's presentation, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So you can see to raise your hand during the Q&A. You're going to click on the icon labeled participants at the bottom of your center of your screen. So at the bottom of the window on the right side of the screen, click on the button labeled raise hand. Okay, so let us know if you can do that. And if not, then we'll switch to asking questions in the chat. Okay, so we're going to jump first to the content, and then we're going to open it up for discussion and explore and really look into social emotional learning and social stories, okay, and how you can utilize them.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, social emotional learning, you might ask, how does that fit into my life? And you know that children need social emotional learning. We've been making a big point about that throughout educational IEP meetings and everything. But have you ever thought of this is exactly what self-esteem and self-confidence comes from? Those are some of the basic tenets of social emotional learning that we use every day. And so we're looking today at what is the definition, the best definition for social emotional learning, where these points, besides being a process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, I was looking at some of the other key points in my research, and it dawned on me, these are life skills, and everybody utilizes these skills in the classroom, later on in college, and then definitely in the world in which we work. Relationships with our family and our employees and also our colleagues. No matter what level you're in the work world, you will be using social emotional skills that you've learned. So we can go to the next slide. And so here's a really good way to look at it. There are two major points that I thought were the best ways to describe SEL. And to this one showing that we're making friendships and relationships to help us achieve a goal. Now, there has been, we've often, in my teaching, I've run across children who appear to be antisocial, but in reality, they just misinterpreted the actions of others because they didn't have those social emotional skills. So the friendships were not made as quickly, and then there was a little tension between the teacher and the child. But with taking social stories and some of the tips that we're going to talk about later on, these types of things became less and less of an issue while I was teaching children. So what it also does is develop a child's resiliency. And this is really important because after a setback, whether or not a friend likes you as much as you like the friend, or you have not achieved a goal that you were hoping to achieve, these are setbacks that could really make a child not want to try. And what I found out was a term that was coined by Dr. Paul Stoltz called the adversity quotient. And this is the ability for anyone to take the bumps in the road and to see the obstacles as opportunities. And so we're going to be looking at how SEL can develop a child's resiliency so that they can have a better adversity quotient. So why is it important? Well, this was a statistic that I didn't realize. Not only 11% improvement in academic success, there was also a study that showed, which was probably a direct correlation, that a child growing up actually earned 11% more than the person who didn't have social emotional learning as their foundation. So it's pretty important if it can make a difference economically. And then Tom Torkelson, the California Department of the State Department of Education, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, it's a mouthful. He said that educators know that learning is not only cognitive, but it's also social and emotional. And the CDE has come up with a website and a department that is specifically directed teachers to learn how to teach children in this important area. So this just began, I think, in 2016. So it's a area that everyone is looking at, not just special ed. And when I began, it was a really big component of special ed, but now they are seeing that multicultural classrooms, different social economic backgrounds, everybody needs social emotional learning. So these are the 5 core components. First, self-awareness, which includes self-esteem and self-confidence, and also a positive mindset, because a child, if they don't believe they can, they won't really try very hard to develop skills in this area. So we're trying to develop a positive mindset throughout this process. Self-management, which also includes that adversity quotient, is when we're trying to teach a child how to overcome certain behaviors and gain certain skills, and then show them that through charting and how many happy faces did you get today for that particular skill. It's a form of self-management. Another one is responsible decision making. Sometimes, as always, children will try to press into the boundaries that we've set for them and our rules, but we have to show them that there are rewards for following the rules and making good decisions, and there are consequences for not following the rules. And those have to be, often they're better set if the child and the adult makes the rules together, which is what I did every beginning of the classroom year. We would sit down and set up rules for the classroom. Relationship skills, this is being a friend and how do you communicate clearly and listen effectively so that you can be a good friend. And then social awareness has to do with feeling compassion for others and understanding and knowing how to work within the social norms. So there are a lot of different ways and variety of ways to teach social emotional learning, and this chart talks about a few of them. But there are 3 ways that these 3 particular points that all of these ways have to include, and that's actively presented. It has to be actively presented. The child can't just sit there, see a chart and say, okay, I'm supposed to do that. The child has to be engaged in the process. So that has to be active, it has to have focus, and that's based on the child's developmental skills and what their needs are. Explicit, the third thing, it has to be explicit instruction, step by step, showing the child that these are the steps we're going to take to get to this targeted skill. But the most effective way that I've found in my experience is through play. Oh my goodness. I love playing with my class. We tried so many different games, and they did not know that they were learning some social skills while they were doing these games. When I first started teaching, my mentor told me that whatever you do, Josan, make it fun. And I followed that rule of thumb throughout my profession. And I'm still trying to make it fun because children, they learn how to manage their emotions when they're playing. They relate to adults and to their peers and communicate with each other. And it even has a huge effect on the brain and how the neurons connect. And in the resources, there's a paper on my website that you can look at with all the research behind why play is so important. And I know Marnie and Jennifer agree that this is an avenue. Children need this. The second area that I thought I should highlight is social stories, because they're a hugely effective way of teaching children skills in social emotional learning. And this particular strategy has certain components. It was started by Carol Gray in about 1991, and she decided that if we have scripted lessons that a child is actually using positive language, this is sort of like self-talk, and that's the way social stories are set up. There are 5 major components, but you're doing positive self-talk so that the child can actually generalize and internalize these ideas in their next situation. So let's look at, I think, the next slide. Okay, these are the 5 components. Descriptive, it answers a WH question like, what are we to do? How are we to behave? And the next one is perspective. It has to do with the feelings and opinions and ideas related to the situation. And I'm going to talk more about these in a sample, but you can see there's a directive, what they're to do, affirmative, like, yes, this is how we do it. And it sort of like gives the child some feedback which is really important when you're learning a new skill. A lot of times when a child doesn't have an adult feedback or some type of feedback in that social story, they're not quite sure if they're doing it the right way. And then cooperative. This is a resolution, or, this is why we do this. So let's take a look at a sample that I created for one of my students in a K1 class. Now, this little boy loved Spider-Man. And, that's what we connected on, because I love Spider-Man too. I mean, when I was 10 years old, I bought all the comic books I could find with Spider-Man in it. So we talked about him a lot. And so I decided to use his BI's information, his behavioral instructor's social story, and then we used his favorite character, Spider-Man, to show how those instructions work. And this is something you can do with any child. I've used a number of different characters depending on the child's interest, and that sort of made it more personal. So and the next slide, we could see that this is his descriptive. He wants Caden to go to school to learn new things. Sometimes Caden, this is my aside, did not want to come to school, and it wasn't fun to him. And he had some experiences that weren't very pleasant, and he didn't feel like a part of the instructional part of school. So we said, okay, this is how you can have fun in school and learn new things. And so in the next slide, we have his perspective phrase. And this is where we want him to think about, okay, it's okay not to want to do it, but it's okay to feel that way. It's not okay not to do it, but we're validating his feelings of, he sometimes feels resistant, but it may upset you, but that's okay. And our next slide gives him the directive. So when you're asked to do something by an adult, instead of being oppositional, Spider-Man looks them in the eye and says, okay, and does it and checks back. And then what we have next is the affirmative and the cooperative statements, knowing that when he does his schoolwork, it will help me do a better job with each of my lessons. He'll gain skills. And then finally, what is the reward? I'll have a break and I'll play with my friends soon. And so that's basically how a social story is set up. Now, social stories are oh, by the way, all of these clip arts, they're Google. You can Google just about any character and find a free clip art for that character. Okay, and so our next one, is there a question, Jennifer? Okay. Do we want to take questions at the end or during?
I think we're going to take them at the end, Josan.
Okay.
But I've written down Jennifer Tucker's name. So
Okay. Okay, thank you. So there are other ways of teaching or methods of teaching social stories. Cartooning, which I love too, is similar to comic strip conversations. And in this, there's like a single frame, as you see, with the child saying hi. And it could be a clip art, or it can be picture exchange cards that you can just tag on a phrase. But it usually draws a situation out for a child. And then the thoughts of other people are in the balloon that you see on the little cartoon. And they can apply to social, organizational, academic. It can go into a lot of different areas. Plus, they're small enough that the child can carry them. You can make them small enough to fit in the front pocket of a child's jacket or their shirt, and take it out in the playground. And what I've done too is I've taken the social skill story, say like Spider-Man, put a binder ring on it, and we've had them on like 3x5 cards or something as small as a Post-it. And we have, or just a flip Post-it, just enough to show the child that, oh, we're going to be practicing this skill. And a technical aside, we always do the social story prior to the activity. I forgot to mention that, but that is so essential because it brings the child up to speed as to what they're to do in this new or unfamiliar situation. Video stories I absolutely loved because everybody has an iPhone or an Android, and what I've done in the past was I've taken a picture of, you have to have the parents' permission, of course. I've taken a movie of the child not in his best behavior, And then I've taken the movie of the child behaving properly. And I've been told later on, don't show them the one that's a negative. But, you know, later on, I think once they achieve the skill, you could say, you know, you used to be like this when you lined up, but now look at how great you're doing. So I would just focus on the positive behavior in the video and actually modeling that, with the child modeling that, they can see themselves doing a great job. And I've seen studies where the video social stories have a greater level of effect, and I guess maintains a child's that that skill is learned a little bit more effectively, because it's visual, it looks 3D, the child sees themselves. So you're actually taking social stories to a very visual level. And that's the resources on our next slide. And I really appreciated having all of these wonderful resources at my fingertips with Google. And the social story links are just amazing. There were at least, I see about 20 of them on this page, and it's just a number of categories, even I think toileting. But you can check out the one that has to do with the social emotional foundations for early learning. And then the article on the brain and how it's shaped by play is my article below. So in our next slide, this is one that I saw and I said, we've got to mention this in this quarantine period, that spending time with children is more important than spending money. And this was a quote from Anthony Douglas Williams from Inside the Divine Pattern. And I just thought that was really cool. I like that picture of the dad walking his kids across a little bridge. So for more information or any questions, you can send me an email. I do channels, I have a YouTube channel. Love for you to subscribe. And each morning I try to take a topic to discuss with parents. And this month we're going to be talking about social stories. So if you'd like to subscribe, that would be great. And Marnie, you're...
That is it for us.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josan. I know we have some questions coming up, and I'm going to kick it off with just one quick question, though. So for parents at home who want to create a social story, where would they start? Because we know that really does help the child regulate. And for a lot of our kiddos right now, deregulation is happening here, there, and everywhere. So where would a parent start if they wanted to create that?
I would look at, and this takes a little time, and it's not a quick fix or a quick answer, but I would try to identify where is the area where you see most of the deregulation happening. It could be a certain time of day. It could be prior to a certain activity that the child knows about. And I stress making a schedule so that the child has a regular routine. And then once you have that schedule and you have something surprising that may come up, you can even put a star on the schedule saying, oh, there's something special that we're going to do at this time, because a lot of deregulation happens when the child doesn't understand what's going on, and it's off their schedule. So what I would do, what I've done in the past, I had one child who would always, and it was without fail, start deregulating on Thursdays. The rest of the week he was fine. And then it dawned on both me and his assistant that he was going to be home over the weekend, and Friday was coming. Basically, that was the answer. And I talked with his mom. There wasn't a regular schedule that they had, so we stressed putting a schedule together for him for the weekend, because in the classroom we had such a rigid schedule. We would not deviate from it. It was so rigid that even when a sub came in, the children would tell the sub, no, we don't do that. Next, we do this. And so, they were like kindergartners. They had it all down. But, it gives the child a feeling of permanence and that structure. It's like the scaffolding of their day. So I would start looking at the schedule and then trying to identify what time of day or when does this happen. And then look at what the behavior is, and then try to create a social story based on that behavior. But in the meantime, try to keep the days pretty fixed for the child.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
You're
Jen, do we have any folks who have questions that Josan can help with?
We absolutely do. But I just want to remind everybody that if you don't get your question answered right now, if you look in the chat box, we are putting up Josan's email address so that you can reach out to her directly, okay? But I do see Miss Jennifer Tucker. She has her hand up. Thank you. Let me see if I can unmute you here. There we go. Thank you for waiting, Jennifer. What is your question?
Thank you. First of all, hi, Jennifer Quick. You came to our school. I'm from Glenwood.
Oh, hi there. Yes.
Inclusion thing at Glenwood. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Josan, actually, I have a question. I love that Spider-Man social story. I thought it was fantastic. I want to know if you have any suggestions or if there's a guide or a template for things to include in a social story. For example, I had a student who was mainstreaming for language arts, and he was having a hard time, like some of his behaviors were acting up. So I made a social story, but I wasn't sure like how far to go, what things to specifically pinpoint. And I love the structure of your Spider-Man story. Do you have any suggestions or resources or anything for that?
Yeah, I Googled Carol Gray. Actually I had the pleasure of meeting her during, when I first came back into education. I took a hiatus, and she had several examples of her social stories at this workshop, and none of them were like cookie cutter. They varied, and some of them were a little longer and some were shorter, but it depends on the age of the child and their ability to understand. So, as long as you just check out Carol Gray's social stories, and then see what those 5 components are. Can you make a descriptive statement? Can you make an affirmative, cooperative? And then, and then play with it. They're not, I could truly say, not all of mine worked the first time. I had to do a lot of re-editing and, getting the buy-in of the child. But I tooled around with the wording for the social story first. And then I went back and I inserted a character that I felt the child would connect with after we had a little interview. Instead, who's your favorite hero? Or who do you watch on TV? And then, I got that, and then I created the social story, presented it, and it was just amazing. One little boy, I cannot remember who was his favorite character, but it was about, he would have a hard time during recess, which a lot of our children do because it's unstructured. So I would read him the social story before he went on the playground. That was his social story, how to behave on the playground. And he did really well. He had like 4 peer buddies, and they would go out. One day, they all brought him back in. And we had some activities that really took my attention away from reading him the story before he went out. And they said, "Miss Wright, you need to read him his social story." And he said, he had a hard time. And I said, oh my God, even the children, they're all kindergartners. The children are so smart. And he came back with them and he sat down and we read the story. Then he went back, he was like refueled. So, you have to keep working with it.
Well, Josan, I have someone else who raised their hand, our dear friend, Nick Day Mack. And I'm glad you did, Nick Day, because I know you have a lot of experience with this. So let me unmute you. There you go, Nick Day.
Hi, thank you everybody, and I miss the playground a lot, and I miss you guys. So as I was listening to the amazing idea of using characters for the social stories, I had a big smile on my face because that reminds me, one time I couldn't make my daughter Diana, who's now 22, but cognitively she's like a 4-year-old. She didn't want to do anything. So all I had to do that day was to use my stormtrooper voice. She stand up and she said, "Yes, sir." So sometimes, the little extra step you can take with younger kids is act out as a character. And if that works, that works. And sometimes she doesn't even want to take her shake. She wants to take it in her Star Wars cup. So, and every morning we do smoothies, and sometimes she doesn't want to take them. All it takes is we have to name the smoothie as one of her favorite superheroes, and there it goes. So I just want to share about that.
Very good. Thanks, Nick.
Perfect.
Does anybody else have a question for Josan?
Or a suggestion, just like Nick Day shared, yeah.
Elise has a question. I see her hand up. Let me see if I can unmute you. Sorry, dear. Okay, there you go.
Okay, there I am. I have a question as an adapted PE teacher for LA Unified. We've been doing a lot of distance learning with parents. And my question is, I want to know if anybody on here or Josan, if you have any ideas for distance learning for teaching PE activities that parents can work with their students, specifically in elementary school.
Yeah, you know, actually I did a YouTube, but I know Marnie and Jennifer are probably well better versed than, you know, more versed than I am. But one thought that I had, which teaches a social skill with a game, is red light, green light, because it has a lot to do with, you know, following directions. So that was my follow the directions game. And you would review with the child prior to the game. When you see this, it's like a red light and you have to stop. And you can just, you know, do like the games, what is it, the freeze dance, to kind of really mirror what that means. Cut off the music, stop, and then you turn on the music and you can show them the go. And, you know, and children love freeze dance. So that would be the one game that I would suggest. But Marnie and Jennifer, you know, you guys got more experience than I do in games. But anything that you could think of? Okay.
I mean, we always used to make up, well, we would make up games, but then we'd also come across, I know there's one game called, it was called Fox, what time is it? But we would change it according to the season. And Nick Day probably remembers this because Nick Day used to be on the playground with me. But we would do like, what time is it? And it's basically a tag game where you start on one end of the field and the witch is in front of everybody, and I named them goblins. If you're not a witch, you're a goblin, and you're in a line and you're posing the question, witch, what time is it? From the goblins all together in unison. So you have to cooperate and make sure everybody is doing it together. And then the witch would yell back, it's 3 o'clock. And then they would have to take 3 steps, right? And then get all the way across. And then once the witch said midnight, then the goblins would have to take off and try to get to the end of the field, the opposite of the end, without being tagged. That was really fun for kids. They loved it. So if it was Thanksgiving time, it would be turkeys and, you know, I don't know, pilgrims or something, right? So the turkeys would line up and ask, pilgrim, what time is it? Or, you know, you just make it up and make it kind of character-based, and they loved it. And they had to cooperate, right? They had to say it together. They had to not get upset if they got tagged. So that was a really great game. I'm gonna unmute Nick Day because I bet she has something to add to that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been doing at home to, you know, try to do something in the little apartment is these foam rackets and balloons. So the goal is not to let the balloon go to the ground, and believe me, you get really tired. So that's just one, right? But one other thing that works very well with Diana, who's not very good motivated to walk or do any type of physical activity, is doing to any type of role playing. And that has been working for Diana since she was in PE at school, and her PE teachers will call me and say, you know, I cannot do your daughter do anything in class. What can we do? What can we do? So I say, well, at the minute that she goes into the door, just tell her that you guys are going to go today to Egypt or to Brazil, or to make an imaginary trip and pretend all the structures are pyramids and mountains and rivers. And that works perfectly. And so these past days, she didn't want to take walks through the neighborhood. So one day we say, hey, we are explorers. We have to explore the neighborhood. So we dress up with hats, bandanas. We went out with our insect catcher, with our butterfly catcher. our magnifying glass, and she even had a backpack. She said, I am the backpack guy. And there you go. It worked for 3 days. Now I had to come up with something else. But, you know, use the imagination because they have it. It's us, we don't have it. So we have to use that tool.
So it's imaginative play combined with what Josan was saying, like know their interests, right?
Right.
What they're interested in and connect.
Right. Make pretend is really huge for developing the brain too. That's in one of the articles. And when you said that, Nick, I just thought about how you can actually use that as a social story. You know, and if the child is having issues with sharing the toys, you could even say, you know, you're going to make pretend that you're, you know, name a child, and I'm going to be you. Okay, and you want to use my toy. And so you could model how the child actually does it and says, okay, now I'm going to try to be nicer to you. And then, you know, but it's more like tutoring, and the child kind of knows that, oh, this is something that I'm not good at. But if you could try to make it maybe not as direct, like, oh, you know, I'd like to keep my toys and I don't want to share them because they're really special to me. Maybe you can ask me for it in a way that I will let you have it.
Hi, Josan. So my question, you know, I really liked when you were talking about self-awareness, self-management. If the child is going through a difficult activity for them and they're taking it quite hard and they're saying no, so their self-talk is negative and you're countering with positive feedback, but they're just not, the self-esteem isn't to that point yet. So what in your experience, you know, how has social emotional learning been incorporated in situations similar to that?
And mute myself. Okay, what I've done is I tried to make, knowing that that's the difficult area for the child, that particular activity, I sometimes try to build in a reward system. Like today, you're going to go to PE. They don't like PE, say, for instance. And we have like a 4-box grid. The 4th box is going to be a preferred that the child really enjoys. And you say, okay, we're going to, you know, PE. And so every time you follow directions, I'm going to give you a happy face. And then when you get 3, you get to take a break with your preferred thing, whatever it is. And that makes, okay, they actually, what works even better is to have them choose what the preferred is. You can have like an array of choices. It could be something to snack on. It could be like a walking break for 2 or 3 minutes, whatever. And then that will be the 4th box. And so there's more buy-in when the child decides what they would like the reward to be. And then you don't really, you know, it would be nice if the child could be in that entire period, but just to take like baby steps to have them participate for a little bit, that can build in some like successes in their lives. And then you extend it, maybe you'll have like 5 boxes next time after a week. But, you know, that has worked really well for me, having a preferred activity at the end of something that wasn't, you know, on their radar as being an enjoyable experience.
So just the reinforcement of the activities towards the end,
right,
is what you're
right
working towards. Okay.
Right. And it's not about the thing that they don't like. It's all about getting that thing that they want. And so he says, yeah, I know PE can be really rough, but, you know, boy, do I like raisins. So, you know, just follow directions, 3 happy faces, and you get, you know, a few raisins. Or maybe you can give them 1 for each happy face or something, you know, just phase it in so it's not like they're satiated and they don't want to do anymore, you know, because they've already gotten their reward. But, you know, you try to make something simple and small so that keeps them entertained, and then 3 more happy faces, they get another set of whatever. And then at the end of the period, if they can make it through like 15, then there could be a really big reward. Like you get a chance to take a 5-minute break. Mm-hmm. And so that has helped me, because there have been a lot of things that my students did not want to do. Just to give you some background, I taught about maybe 10 years in art class. And then I had an fully included class that I shared with Gen Ed teacher, kindergarten. And that was really a lot of fun too, because we had peer models that the children were able to see, and the children were just beautiful. But there's a lot of I guess differences of abilities when you have that class, and it was like almost like 25 children. It was a lot of children in that class, but finding those tangibles that I could reward them with, the children who had difficulty with certain tasks. And it wasn't just my children who had autism or had the disability or different ability. It was also gen ed children that would see that this was their treatment. They said, well, what can I get? And so we were working with everybody, you know, because like I said in the beginning, these are skills that everyone needs, and it's not just about a child with special needs that we're trying to improve social and emotional learning.
Mhm.
Everyone can use that skill. So.
We are going to have to start wrapping it up, my friends. We're a little bit past time, which is okay.
Okay.
But I wanted, so Josan, just speaking to the parents in the room specifically. So look in your chat. If you have any other questions that we didn't get to, there's the happylittlegarbage truck@gmail.com. So you can reach Josan there, and then there is her website. But what I wanted to do is just kind of circle back around to the moms and dads in the room.
Okay.
And just before we go, our next Lunch and Learn, hopefully, is going to be on adaptive PE in small spaces. So Nick Day, you can help us create that one. We have some wonderful partners from LAUSD's Division of Special Ed who are going to step in and help us create an adaptive PE class in small spaces. So.
Great.
Yeah, that'll be the next Lunch and Learn. So keep your eyes on your inbox. And then also we have our 30 days of play. So if you go to our website, it's inclusionmatters/play at home. And that has a lot of tips and tools from a lot of different perspectives. So we have that as well. But I guess I wanted to close out to say, like for moms and dads right now, I know for me, you know, my child's emotional well-being and social emotional learning skills right now are of paramount concern. You know, we're keeping academics on track, but we're keeping it small, right? Because that's what we can do in this moment. What would you give advice to on parents in terms of creating social stories? Like for me, I was thinking about the fact that our children are no longer going to school. So do you create a social story around that? And just so to help them kind of process that transition, because that's been a really difficult one for a lot of kids.
That isn't true. Yeah, I would totally, you know, there is, and if you email me, I can give you the link to a packet that I found in my searching, and I should have put it on this particular resource list, but it has to do with how a parent could address the COVID-19 quarantine. And it has like a whole myriad of activities and talks about social stories to, you know, touches on a little bit of everything. But my overall thought is that this is a very difficult time because children are not in their regular setting, or they're not in their regular schedule with school. And this is an unprecedented time for both parents and children to be at home. So I would say that try to use every opportunity as a social story opportunity or a game, because when you're playing with the child and that give and take in an activity is actually helping them learn taking turns and having they don't see it as a social skill that they're learning, but it all has to do with communication, listening, turn taking. Smallest thing, cooking with you, they're learning how to follow directions, going outside to explore nature, as Nick, I believe it was, who mentioned that they went on an exploration. You know, those are things that are, you know, it can actually relieve some of the pressure of being inside for such a long period of time. And maybe even make Friday the day that you do a certain really special thing that they can anticipate throughout the week. You know, I think that some of these things, plus that packet, which I will forward to, maybe I'll forward it to you, Marnie, and we could put that on the follow-up email. these are the things that I found that it seems to be, someone thought about this way back in February, and I was just astounded at how much they had a social story about COVID-19. They even included one about distance and what germs are. And so to explain it from a very simple level to perhaps a high school student, but it was geared toward helping parents whose children are on the spectrum. And so I think it's just a really wonderful resource. I could not have thought of that much on my own, but this was a team of people who came up with this idea, and it was just very timely. So I'll give you that, and hopefully it'll help.
Well, thank you, Josan, for being here. You're so wonderful, and I can't encourage you enough to join Josan's YouTube channel, because she is just dropping content and knowledge every day that's really, it's bite-sized. It's really easy to process and easy to implement at home. So
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you for being here. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're thrilled. So look for your inbox for the next Lunch and Learn, and it's going to be focusing on adaptive PE in small spaces. All right, you guys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good Friday. Stay well, please.